Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Go Farther series here on the Start Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sangucci. That's me. Today's episode is the last of this series. I do have one more bonus episode coming out, but officially, this is the last episode of this particular series, the Go Farther series. And everything I've been focusing on with these episodes going all the way back to January of this year is how to go farther, this concept of go farther, which is do more, be happy, surprise yourself, go farther. I have to admit, I've been procrastinating 4 weeks now, almost 4 weeks on doing this last episode. This morning, I was trying to figure out why have I been procrastinating so much in recording this last episode. Partly, I made some excuses for myself because I was traveling. We had a wonderful family vacation where I was doing my 100K ultra marathon. A lot of the episodes have built up to that. So I'll talk briefly about today. And that's what the bonus episode is all about. Then I made the excuse that when I got back, I was busy. I was catching up on work stuff. And then we took another workcation to visit some family. And then I'm back in the office again. And then next week, I'm going to do another workcation visiting family again before the end of the summer. So I have all of these air quote reasons not to do the episode because I've just been too busy working on stuff in the early mornings when I typically record this. And that's where I realized, interestingly enough, that the procrastination is actually the theme of what we're going to talk about today, which is the journey is the joy. The journey is the joy. I was looking for ways to make this perfect. I was looking for ways to make this episode the ideal denouement, if you will, to this episode series. And I realized that the whole concept of this episode, the journey is the joy, is that there's not typically there shouldn't be a single moment or this one situation where you're like, okay, now I nailed it. Everything that when it comes to this whole notion of how do I do more, be happy, surprise myself, is that the be happy piece means to enjoy the process. And that means that the journey is the joy. So for me in this podcast episode series, the journey has been from the moment I decided to do this series way back in January and started mapping out the episodes to staying disciplined to recording episodes nearly every week throughout the course of the winter, then the spring, and now into the summer. I'm looking outside my window. It's not quite 6 a.m. and it's not quite daylight yet. When I started this, it was totally black and dark outside because it was winter. Then I went through the spring, and many times I was recording this episode, there was already daylight outside, and now the days are getting shorter again. So it's a good reminder that time moves on with or without us. Time is continuous. So let me talk a bit about the journey is the joy, and then we're going to, talk through some of the topics here. So first of all, why this topic as the final topic here in the series? There's two things that come to mind for me, two questions that I think can be equally frustrating for all of us. Whenever we're shooting for some outcome or aspiration, we've got some objective in mind, whether it's personal or professional or relationship wise. And the two questions that can be frustrating or scary is one, what if I put in all this time and effort and work? What if I don't achieve the outcome? What if I don't hit my goal? So for me, it's on a race, it could be maybe a time goal or a distance goal. In work, it could be a certain revenue goal throughout the course of the year. It could be a funding goal that you need to inject new life and some runway into your business. It could be certain customers that you're targeting. Obviously, in life, it could be certain goals around family or any other sort of work that you're doing in a private setting, right? So that big question is like, I'm going to put all this time and effort. What if I don't hit the outcome that I want? On the other side, equally, what if I do? What if I do hit the outcome? What if I do hit my objective? What if I do hit my goal? What's on the other side? And that's where I think there's some fear in some sense that what if I put in this time and effort and work and it's all wasted? Like, was it really wasted? Right? What did I learn across the way instead? And then, of course, if we do hit the outcome, sometimes, and we'll talk a bit about this today, was it worth it? Like, were the sacrifices that I made along the way worth it? And while that moment where maybe I close the round and the money hits the bank account, or we get the email from the customer that they want to move forward, or we tally up the revenue at the end of the year to close the books and we realize that we hit our revenue goal. Or for me, I finish a race or I finish a race in a certain time and I look back at that moment and say, like, was it worth it? Because on the other side, after all that time, all the effort, all the work that we put in, life goes on, right? We have to realize that time is continuous, regardless of whether we hit the outcome in that moment today or next week or next month or next quarter. The sun is going to set at the end of the day, and the next morning it's going to rise again, and we're going to have to move forward either way. And so that brings me to, obviously where we want to go with all this is like the whole concept of go farther is to do more, be happy, surprise yourself. And this is really the be happy part of what we're talking about here when it comes to go farther. So a couple of things I want to talk through as a way to kind of highlight this point. One, I share a couple of quick things when it comes to my own endurance racing. And two, I want to share what I've been observing when I've been watching the Olympics in the evenings. I've got Peacock as an app. So what I'll do is I'll sit down at night and look at what the big events were throughout the day. And then I'll just kind of flip through and watch some of those big events. For me, two of the sports I love to watch are swimming and track and field. Those are my two, and particularly track and field. I like the running races for different reasons, which I'll talk about in a moment. And then, of course, I'll dive into some other sports. Get a chance to see very often. I watched some equestrian with my son. I watched some judo the other day, which was pretty cool to watch. I'll flip through some other sports just to check them out, but mostly I like watching the swimming and the track and field events and the running. And I think the reason I like watching those events is because I've done a fair bit of swimming and I've done a fair bit of running, and the speeds at which those athletes are moving is just phenomenal to me. Like when I see their split times on one cycle around the track, one lap around the track, where I see, I watch when they're doing 1,000-meter swim or a 400-meter swim in a race, and I know what my times are. It's like they were literally twice as fast as me. It's just incredible to watch those athletes at the perfection that they reached with their strokes and their speeds and everything that they do, every bit of preparation. So last night and the last couple of nights, I've been watching some of the track and field, and it was interesting because I like watching, especially some of the distance races. So 1,500 meters, it's kind of an intermediate distance race. There's the 5K, 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters, those kinds of races. There's a 3,000 meter steeplechase, which is a pretty cool race to watch. Because I like those races because they're obviously fast, but they're also more of the endurance style because you have to set pace, you have to think about your energy level. So in some ways, it kind of reminds me of being on the trail and doing some of the long races that I run. This is where the journey of the joy becomes interesting from an observational standpoint, because one example that the other night I was watching the 10,000-meter men's running race. So 10,000 meters, it's something like 25, 26 laps around the track. 25, I think. It makes sense, right? 4,000 meters around, 25 laps. So it's a race that these guys, which again is just incredible, finishing this race in 26, 27, 28 minutes. So if you translate that into on a per mile basis, like for me to run a 10K, if I was like running an optimal time, if I got down to like 40 minutes to run a 10K, 45 minutes would be really fast for me. Whereas these guys are doing it in like 27 minutes. It's just like incredible how fast that they go. And I was watching the 10,000 meters, and there's a lot of different runners from all across the world, of course. You've got some of the African runners from Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, which have always been world class. And then you've got other folks from, the 10,000 meters is a race that really spans the globe. There's some really great Scandinavian runners from places like Finland and Norway. You've got European runners from Germany, France. The US has some good runners as well. And as I was watching this 10,000-meter race develop, there's an American named Grant Fisher who, was in the mix and certainly is, a good runner. Otherwise, he wouldn't be in the Olympic final. And I was watching this race as it was unfolding and how he just stayed behind the leaders. There's, 3 Ethiopian runners that were all kind of setting the pace, and they were working with each other as teammates, and they would take turns leading the laps, leading the race. So much so that one of the Ethiopian runners would actually like literally push one of his teammates and say, "It's your turn to lead," and set the pace. And they set out this pace. And so these 3 Ethiopian runners were setting the pace, and the American Grant Fisher was just kind of tucked in behind those 3. So as they would rotate who was ahead, he was just kind of sitting in second, third, fourth place. Sometimes he dropped that 5th or 6th. and just kind of keep it on their shoulder and letting them do a lot of the work. So the final lap comes, and that's what it really turns into a sprint after running, 9,600 meters. And this guy, Grant Fisher, just never faded. And he ended up coming in third. He took the bronze. The finishing time was 26:43:14. So that was the winning time. The second place time was 26:43:44. And then his time was 26:43:46. So it was literally 3/10 of a second between first place and third place after running 26, after running 10,000 yards or 10,000 meters. And when I talk about the journey as the joy and appreciating and having gratitude around the accomplishment, here's a guy that finished third and could do nothing but smile. This guy, Grant Fisher, if you go back and watch the recording, if you have access to the recording or find it on YouTube, it's amazing to see how happy he was to come in third place and how he just hung with the leaders the whole time through. It was interesting because you think, well, I came in third place, and there's the saying that the second happiest person in an Olympic race is the person that comes in third, who gets the bronze. The unhappiest person is the person that comes in second and wins the silver. I don't know if that's true, but it was so interesting to watch him come in third and feel that sense of accomplishment, knowing that he is now the third fastest runner in the world by only 3/10 of a second. So it's just amazing to watch that and realize like this journey that he has been on over the last couple of years, training for this race, putting himself in that position, getting to the place where at the start of that race, he was in ideal condition to hang with some of the other best runners in the world and surprisingly finished third. Now I contrast that to the 3,000 meter steeplechase women's race that I watched last night. And there's a woman, Ruth Chemitai from Uganda, who one of the top women runners in the world in these distances. And she set out a scorching pace. She was leading from the front most of the way. And it wasn't until the final turn and the final 100 meters that a woman from Bahrain came around her and just beat her to the finish by, a couple milliseconds. And you could see obviously the joy of the Bahrain runner because she came in first. And this woman, Ruth Chemitai, how devastated she was because she had worked so hard for this race and she had pushed so hard and she had a clear race strategy, which was she was going to set the pace, push the pace, really try to extend out the field so that it wouldn't turn into a sprint at the end. But yet this other woman from Bahrain was able to keep with her. And at the end, it was just the two of them to the finish line that I think the third place person came in by half a second or more after them. And showing, after the race is over, they show the winner, they show silver, they show the bronze place finisher post race. And you could just see how devastated she was that she came in second place. And of course, in that moment of spending the years leading up to that race, knowing that this is your moment to go out and win that gold medal, and just to fall short, to execute on the race strategy perfectly into the last 100 meters and not be able to come through. It's hard. It's hard to watch those. It's hard to watch those athletes, and your heart goes out to them because of the sacrifices that they make. A lot of these runners, especially in places like Uganda, Ethiopia, Kenya, like outside of running, there's nothing else, right, that's waiting for them. And so there's all this pressure of these countries watching them. If an American doesn't win a race, what do? We could just go back to our life. We might talk about it at the water cooler or ask somebody, hey, did you see that race? It's too bad the American didn't win. But when you start talking about these countries in places like Uganda or Ethiopia or some of the smaller countries, Norway, Finland, where they have, these ultimate distance runners and they don't win those races, it's kind of a big deal. There's a lot of pressure on these people. And you just can tell by watching this woman how devastated she was. My heart really went out to her feeling that. And so for, people like her, like, I don't know the full background situation. I'm just sort of thinking through it a little bit as I was watching this race and thinking about this episode. For people in that situation, that journey might not be as much of a joy because of the pressure and knowing that there isn't a lot of other options available to them outside of running. They have this talent and they work so hard and they have the pressure of the nation behind them. And yet if they don't finish as expected, then you can see the weight of that crashing down, which leads to that outpouring of emotion. Thanks for listening to this episode and thanks for listening to this series. I want to give you a little preview of what is ahead. So, while this episode is the conclusion of our Go Farther series, except for the bonus episode that's coming up and going out next week that you can listen to, I do want to remind you that the podcast is not ending, just the series is ending. So, I am excited about all that we've been able to accomplish with the podcast this year and moving into the next couple months, starting in September. What we're going to be doing is a whole new series on the show, and we're going to be turning our attention back to specific selling strategies, systems, skills, all the things that we do every single day here at Sales Qualia, all the things we've been doing for nearly a decade to coach, help, consult, teach, do all the things we do with the enterprise sales start or enterprise startups that we work with each and every day here at Sales Qualia. So I've got an outstanding lineup of guest experts that are going to be joining me over the months in the fall. So the next series is going to run in the fall of 2024. We're going to have a couple of guests that are going to be joining me a couple of times even. And the focus of this series is going to be diving into the specific events, emails, conversations, meetings. We're going to be looking for really small, what seem to be small and maybe inconsequential moments in a sales process, something as small and simple as a single email that you might be sending, or a single email you might have received from a prospect or from a lead, or a certain conversation or a certain step along the way in the enterprise sales process. And with our guest experts, we're going to be diving into why and how that single email, as an example, might be the one thing that keeps that deal moving or can cause that deal to stall out for the next 6 months, 12 months, or really forever in a lot of ways. So I'm excited. We're going to have a couple of experts, people like Jason Bay, who is the founder at Outbound Squad. We're going to have Megan Mishiak, who's been a coach with us here at Sales Quality over the years and does tons of training and consulting, especially around customer discovery and the MEDIC framework for customer discovery. Monica Stewart, who has worked side by side with me here at Sales Quality and also is an excellent, experienced sales leader who's been a three-time sales VP, just like me, at enterprise B2B tech startups. And also Leslie Vinetz, who probably many of you follow on LinkedIn. And if you don't follow any of these four people, make sure you do. Leslie is a sales expert. She is a top voice on LinkedIn. She's also coached with me here at Sales Qualia. She also works with many different types of enterprise B2B companies and helping them with their outreach, helping them with their messaging, helping them with their psychology around sales. So those are four probably, hopefully, somewhat familiar names to you, people we've had here on the podcast as guests and people I've worked with very, very closely over the course of the last few years. We'll also be having Stephen Steers, who you're going to hear next week, as soon as next week, in a bonus episode of the Go Farther series. So Stephen and I met years ago when he was first a client in our startup selling coaching program. And we've started with a relationship and maintained a professional relationship. And now we're just good friends that work on sales every day. So I'm so excited about this next episode, this next series. We're going to be taking a break from new episodes for the next few weeks, but pulling out some of my favorite episodes from the archives, from the hundreds and hundreds of episodes we've done over the last 8 years. So no shortage of content to share with you to keep the momentum going for you through these next few weeks as we spin up the new series coming up in about a month's time. So I just want to say thank you for listening. Please do follow the show so you don't miss an episode and you don't miss when this new series is coming out. Please tell a friend or 10 about the show, and please do leave us a review on your favorite podcast player. So that's it for now. Let's head back to the rest of this episode, the final episode, the denouement of the Go Farther series, which is focused on how the journey is the joy. So as I watched that, I was trying to think about myself and contrasting my situation where I'm, for example, doing these long distance endurance races, in my case, the 100K that I just did out in Finland, how different it is for me. So, yes, I train for these races and I work hard for these races, but at the end of the day, it's a hobby. Like I pay money. I pay a lot of money to enter these races, sometimes anywhere from $100 up to some of these races are $1,000, or more when you start talking about a 200-mile race, the entry fees alone, right? Then you add on top of that travel, in this case, like traveling over to Finland to do this race, how lucky am I to be able to do that? And then all of the work, all of the effort that goes into it. Like I make some sacrifices, getting up early on getting up at 4 o'clock on a Saturday morning to go hit a trail run when I need to, or making sure on Wednesday I get up early and hit the watch before 5 a.m. over at Pena Adobe to do my repeats, making sure I block out time in the middle of the day to go get a run in when I need to get a run in, or a lifting session when I need to get a lifting session in. Like all of those things are nice, but it's all luxury for me. It's all fun. I pay to do these things. And there was time when I first started doing these races, when I first started doing triathlons back in 2008, 2009, and I got into this sort of mode. It was like always looking for the next race. I'd finish a race, I'd go do an Olympic distance triathlon here locally. I'd do that race and then I'd come home and and go and look for where is there another triathlon I can do next weekend because I want to go race again. And I would get that rush. I would get that feeling of accomplishment when I crossed the finish line. And I'd be looking at my times and like, how was my swim? How was my bike? How was my run? How can I improve my transition? I became fixated with it. And I remember getting up to a point when I was starting to do the Ironman triathlons, and I did my first Ironman. And I remember a moment when, in the middle of the triathlon, the middle of the Ironman, I'd done the swim, I'd done the bike. I was in my last 5, 6 miles on the run. And I was relying on my wife, Lena, to provide me with some salt pills at a certain moment. I was like, hey, there's going to be a certain time where I'm going to be coming through and I want to make sure I get some salt pills so I don't cramp up, get some water. And for whatever reason, partly just because we had family there and some other things, she just wasn't able to meet me and get me that stuff. And then she showed up at the meeting spot where I was going to be on this course. And I remember being so angry with her in that moment. And I ended up finishing the race and I ended up finishing below my time. And we certainly had a great celebration at the finish line, finishing my first Ironman triathlon. But that moment has always stuck with me about how badly I failed in that moment to appreciate how much that she had to sacrifice for me doing all the training, all the money that I spent on equipment, all the time I spent away from home. The fact that she was giving up a week to drive to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, just so I could do this Ironman. And then all of the race preparation and spending all day literally just standing around waiting for me to finish a swim and then go do a 6 hour bike and then go and do a 4 hour, 5 hour marathon, just sitting around from literally daybreak till past sunset. And then that's where, you start to realize like, how important is this for real? It's not that important. It's a race. It's just a race. I understand, for me, I run a business. It's my livelihood. My wife and I both work. Both of us, we rely on both of our income. There's a lot of pressure on me as I run this business because the business creates a lot of pressure. And there's a lot of sacrifices my wife still has to make because I'm doing this business. And I get that if you're running your business or you've got your work, probably you're feeling a lot of pressure every day. Especially if you're running a business, you're an entrepreneur, you're a CEO, you're a founder, you've got pressure from your team, you got pressure from investors, you got pressure from your customers, you got pressure on yourself and pressure from your family. All of those things, make you feel like you're under the microscope and that you know all these people are watching you and you want to be able to succeed for them. And I know that's important. It's also important to kind of pull yourself out and realize that I'm probably going to be okay, even if this doesn't work out. And this brings me to a couple of strategies that I want to share with you when it comes to the journey is the joy. That hopefully, again, just like everything, these are things that work for me. And I'm just sharing them with you in the hopes that maybe something here might be helpful for you as you're going along your journey to go farther so that perhaps along the way you can experience a little bit more joy so that it doesn't always feel hard or it doesn't always feel like the world is going to end if you don't succeed in getting to that revenue goal or getting that next round of funding or landing that next customer. So I've got 5 strategies written down here that have worked for me that I've been doing over the years, and I want to share them with you. And that's going to be it. I'm going to keep this short. and wrap this thing up. And again, we do have a bonus episode coming out. If you want to hear all the details of my race, the 100K that I did in Finland, I had Steven Steers join me on my on the podcast. We're recording an episode. He was curious about how the race went, so we just turned it into a Q&A. So if you want to hear the details about the race and all of that, then you can listen to the bonus episode that will be coming out just after this one. So 5 strategies. Strategy number 1, journal every day. Journal every day. So years and years ago, probably it's been about 15 years, maybe more. I started doing morning pages. So every morning I get up and I journal almost every morning. It's not, lockstep. There are mornings I certainly miss, but definitely 90% of the time I get up every morning and I do morning pages. And it's just a chance for me to think through what's my day like ahead? What did I do yesterday? How am I feeling? What opportunities do I have? What challenges do I have? And by sometimes going back and picking up those journals from 6 months ago, 6 years ago, and seeing where I was in my life, where I was in my mindset, where I was in the business, where I was with everything else going around me, and then contrasting that with where I am today, it always gives me a sense of accomplishment to know, like, wow, look how much I've progressed with my mindset, with my maturity, with my relationship, with my business, with my health, with my wealth, right? So that's always been big for me. And in particular, I remember when I was at Blend Labs as their first head of sales. I was back there. I was there back in 2013, 14, 15. So I remember feeling frustrated that as we were growing, we're always hitting these challenges, always hitting these roadblocks, always hitting these obstacles. And I come home and I talk about it at work and always feel like this sense of frustration, like, why can't we go faster? Or why can't the product team finish this product? Or why is this customer being so difficult? Or what went wrong that I lost that sale? And my wife told me in her infinite wisdom that I should just keep a log, a daily log every day of stuff that we did. So I started doing that. And so every day on the train, as I was coming back from the office, I would open up an Evernote file and just bullet point out, okay, these are things that we did. And I just go through my calendar, go through my email, go through my meetings, and just document all the stuff that we did throughout the course of the day. And today, more than 10 years since writing some of those things, I look back on that Evernote file. And I've used some of that Evernote file as a way to teach startups as part of our workshops, teach clients about what some of the challenges are going to be as they're trying to implement with those first big customers. There's that sense of accomplishment because I realized, like, wow, 10 years ago, this is the stuff I was doing. And now this is where I am at this moment. And when I was going through some of the challenges at Blend, even then, I could look back over the course of the last couple of months or the last couple of quarters and say, wow, okay, like here I am, like whining and complaining about why Wells Fargo was going so slow. But, they're actually going to be our fifth customer. And look how many other new customers brought on since then or since before then, right? So this idea of like journaling every day just gives you a chance to kind of see your progress over time because you can't always tell. If you look in the mirror every day, you can't always tell that you might need a haircut. Like if you look at your hair, you look at your physical appearance, day to day, we always look the same. But then at some point, right, we go and get a haircut, and then other people notice, like, oh, wow, it looks like you got a haircut. But nobody notices day after day that your hair is getting a little longer. It's kind of the same concept here. So that's strategy number 1. Strategy number 2 is to be sure you're recording your achievements, not just what you're doing, but your achievements. One of the things I learned from a coach named Dan Sullivan was part of his coaching program years ago. And he has this idea of what he calls the daily practice. So this is part of my personal journal where I will sit down and one of the things he has you do every single day is you write down 5 achievements, and then after each achievement, you write down why is that important? Then you write down how could I make some further progress? And then what would be the next step to make that progress happen? And that's part of my routine. That's part of my journaling because even this morning, as I sat down and looked at yesterday, I was able to write down 5 things, 5 achievements that ranged everything from getting to a jiu-jitsu class at night because I haven't been going because I was training for this race and have been on vacation, to making sure my son got to summer camp and that he was happy doing the summer camp that he was doing, to some specific work stuff, some progress we made on certain deals or certain accomplishments that, little pieces of progress along the way on that journey. It just helps you to see in the moment, day to day, like, wow, yesterday I did these 5 big things. One of my achievements yesterday was taking a nap. I was wiped out. I was tired. I needed a nap. I needed a reset before the end of the day, before I finished up my work and before I got to the jiu-jitsu class. Like that's an accomplishment because it means I'm taking care of myself. I'm paying attention to myself. So number one, journal every day. Number two, record your accomplishments. Number three, this is something that Tim Ferriss has talked about, which is fear setting. And this moment ago, I just said, hey, if you don't get that round of funding or you don't meet those revenue goals or the company doesn't turn out the way you want it to turn out, it's probably going to be okay. And it's probably going to be okay because if you go through the absolute worst case scenario, for most of us, if you're listening to this podcast, like for most of us, that worst case scenario is probably not all that bad on a relative sense. And so when he talks about this fear setting exercise, it's basically saying if you can come up with the worst possible scenario and get comfortable with that happening and realizing like, hey, I can deal with that being the worst case scenario, then it should give you some sense of, hey, this is going to be okay. So let's just keep moving forward, right? That should be a motivator for you to realize like, hey, the worst case scenario is actually not all that bad for most of us. So doing that fear setting exercise can be really helpful. The fourth is just don't take yourself so seriously. And again, like I know there's a lot of pressure if you're running the business, there's a lot of pressure if you're raising a family, it's a lot of pressure if you're in a relationship with other people. You want that to go well. You know, those people are relying on you. You put pressure on yourself because you want to be successful. But at the end of the day, we're all doing our best. And sometimes there's outside external forces that just work against you. It could be market forces. It could be, situations at customers. It could be environmental situations. It could be health situations that pop up that you didn't expect. I remember my son last fall where we had to take him to the emergency room because his appendix had burst, right? All of a sudden that threw, a big wrench into that week. Obviously for him and for multiple weeks as he recovered out of that, he had to miss soccer matches. He had to miss, some school. He had to miss a lot of different things that he loves to do. And for me, of course, and my wife, it's like now we got a week, we're going to be hanging out in the hospital. So you have to remember there's just external forces that are going to work against you. That's life. So it's really a matter of like, how do you accept when those forces work against you and kind of be like water and go with the flow and just not take yourself so seriously? Because there's so many things that are out of our control that if we try to control everything, then we're just going to set ourselves up for disappointment. And then finally, fifth strategy to help you, hopefully realize that the journey is the joy is just appreciate the opportunity, appreciate the people around you, appreciate your team at work, appreciate your customers, appreciate your family close to you, if you have kids, if you have a spouse or partner of some kind, your extended family, if you still have your parents with you, or aunts and uncles or friends, just appreciate that you have this opportunity and appreciate these people around you are supporting you. Tell yourself, I get to do this. I get to wake up today and work on my business. I get to solve the problems that are ahead of me. I get to figure out these hard things. I got to figure out a way around these obstacles. These obstacles are actually an opportunity to learn something, right? And I talked about earlier, like for me doing these races, like I pay to run through the forest. I remember my mother-in-law, who was a public school teacher in Boise, Idaho for many years. She used to teach the ESL program, English as a Second Language. Boise is a refugee city. And so all of her students were refugees from other parts of the world, students from Africa, Middle East, places, Pakistan, Afghanistan, places in Latin America, where families would come to the US and these students would be put together in a classroom, and it was her job to teach those students. And she spent time with them every day. And I remember one morning just sitting around her visiting, and she was telling me a story about a family. One of the kids in her class is from Afghanistan. And she told me how that student had shared with her how they got out of Afghanistan. And what that entailed was walking and hiking at night for over 150 miles over the course of multiple weeks to get out from where they were to be able to cross the border and get out of Afghanistan. And I think about that a lot. If I'm out there on the trail and I'm thinking, oh, woe is me, things are hard. Well, I paid money to put myself in a situation to run through the forest or up this mountain. There are millions of people right now, even perhaps billions of people, that are in situations that are so much different than ours that we have to remember to appreciate what we have here in front of us, what we get to wake up to every day, the opportunity to go work on a business or run a race or spend time with their family or try to figure out how you're going to get your kid to school and also do that Zoom meeting at the same time. Like, just remember that right now, all across the world, there's all of these people that are suffering, all of these people that don't have these options, they don't have these opportunities, nor will they ever have these opportunities. And I think if you can just on a regular basis, again, for me, on a regular basis, just go and appreciate this and just think through how lucky we all really are. That's when you realize at the end of the day, it's all just fun. The journey is the joy. Because at the end of the day, the sun's going to set. Tomorrow, the sun's going to rise. And somewhere down the road, for all of us, we're not going to see that next sunrise. It's all going to be over. And whatever you believe is going to happen after it's all over for all of us, it doesn't matter because this life is going to be over. So remember, the journey is the joy. Do more, be happy, surprise yourself, go farther.